Hi, Micki. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, it's been a long day. How was your day?
Yeah, likewise. It's been a long weekend.
That's true. That is
Yeah,
true.
lots going on.
Yes, a lot is going on. Okay, well, for the sake of people that are in here on time, let's just start.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay,
Jump right on in.
great. Okay, so good evening, everybody. My name is Miri Hoffman. I'm an elder law lawyer and a gerontologist, and my office focuses mainly on senior citizens, helping them when they reach significant crossroads in their life. Mainly, we're talking about wills and enduring power of attorneys and guardianship issues, and also prenups or financial agreements for second or third relationships, and also estate planning for people with dual citizenships, Israel and the US. And for my broad exposure with this age group, I realized that there are a lot of other important issues which are not legal, which should be discussed. And therefore, I have this podcast called Golden Topics, Significant Crossroads for Seniors, where we discuss other important issues. And today, we're going to be talking about intimacy later in life. And I have the honor of having Micki Laavin-Pell, who is a marriage, family, intimacy, and trauma therapist. And she'll be talking to us about this subject. So, first of all, Micki, thank you so very much for joining us. It's a real
My
treat having
pleasure.
you here.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more?
Okay. Well, I've been a marriage, family, intimacy, and trauma therapist for almost 25 years now. I did my training in Australia. I'm originally from New York, got married to a Brit, moved to Australia on my way to Israel. We lived there for 7 years, had three children. I requalified and became a marriage and family therapist there. And I was in private practice there for 7 years, and I've been in Israel for 16. So we had another child along the way. And yeah, and my practice really focuses on new starts. Whether you be starting out in a new relationship because it's your first time, or for couples who need a restart on their relationship if they've been married for a while and they've come across some new challenges that they haven't come across before, or even old challenges that have constantly been getting them a loop and they're just in a loop and they're finally just thinking to themselves, that's it. We want to clear the page and do things afresh.
Very nice. Sounds really great. Okay, so let's just dive straight in. What are the differences between intimacy or intimate relationships earlier in a relationship and later in a relationship, or earlier in life and later in life? Tell us a little bit more
Yeah.
about
So earlier in life, couples really have a hard time finding time for each other. They're so darn busy. They're just starting their careers often, or they're just really busy trying to earn enough money for their growing family. And they're just trying to find this way of balancing everything out, right? That's really the hottest part. And they're often over focused on their kids. And it's really, really hard to make time for themselves. And just even being able to eke out one date night a week is a mammoth effort. And so that's the thing with the younger couples. With the older couples, it's they have too much time. They've, put so much effort into growing their nest egg, and hopefully they've done a really good job of it. And now they're able to retire, or they're getting closer to retirement age, and their kids are moving out, and they've got this big, wide, empty nest, and it's just the two of them and the walls. And they often drive each other crazy and they want to start climbing those walls. And in doing so, there's a real fear around how do we navigate this intimacy and you know, how do we make time for each other in a way where it's not overkill? And oftentimes, if they haven't had their own hobbies or if they don't have shared hobbies, it's about trying to figure out how much time to spend together, how much time to spend apart, how to speak to each other in a way that feels loving and respectful, and that enables them to want to move into the bedroom and have fun there too.
it. I remember when I was like young with three very, very small kids, I was counting the hours that I would get her sleep during, like that was my thing. Like, can I get
Yeah.
2 hours? Can I get 3 hours? Can I get 4 hours tonight? That was like the big thing for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I can really see that. I also,
And those memories, sorry, those memories die hard. People like, when their kids are even older, they're still thinking like that way. And it's like they haven't had that experience for years and years, and they forget that behind them.
true, it's true. Um, I think also in later stages of life, you have to, it's not just the intimacy, but it's also the relationship. You have to get to know your partner again because
Yeah.
sometimes you actually sort of neglected that area because you were so busy either on your career and your children or your career and your children and the partner was sort of taken for granted. No? Do you
Yeah.
feel that?
Sometimes you've gone in different paths and you forgot to check in with each other and tell them that you've decided to go in different ways, or sometimes you literally have gone in different ways and you're sort of not really connecting in the same way that you once were. And it's sometimes it feels a bit threatening to be able to say, you know what, you're here and I'm here, and I don't know how we really find a bridge between those two places. And sometimes those things are bridgeable, and sometimes it feels too hard. And so people go in a lot of different directions there. I'm of the belief that there's always a way to find a bridge. If you loved each other enough to get to where you were, and you have worked hard, you must have worked somewhat hard to get to where you were, and you have been able to talk openly and honestly with each other, then there's always a way. It's just a matter of getting over that that emotional intimacy hump and that vulnerability, and being able to express yourself in a way that's soft and gentle as opposed to yelling and loud and scary.
Absolutely. I think if you have the basics, if you
Yeah.
manage to, make sure that you have the basics of love and honor and respect, then
Hmm.
I think you can bridge it, like you said, even though
Yeah.
you've gone different ways. But I'm thinking also that if you bridge it, the intimacy is something that will come with it, but you can't just grab into intimacy if you haven't really got to know your partner again. Meaning you have to still, it's like date night. You have to still go through date night again and just get to
Yeah.
know the person again.
And it's a different kind of date night. It's a date night where you're not just, on Netflix, or you're not just in front of a screen. It's a date night where you're really just the two of you together, talking openly and honestly, and really just being able to laugh and share jokes with one another, and have that shared humor, or have those points of connection that hopefully you've created over the years.
100%. Okay, what are the challenges older couples face when it comes to physical intimacy?
So, so older couples have a whole bunch of different issues that younger couples don't.
Right.
Mainly the fact that they are aging, and that illness often comes along with it. Things like dementia and cancers and heart disease and all those things that we have to test for a lot more, have colonoscopies and things like that, right? So all those sorts of things run a lot more medication as we age.
Right.
And those medications really interfere with our functioning. They interfere with men's ability to have an erection, have a libido, hold an erection, ejaculate at the appropriate time, things like that. And for the women, it's about, a lack of libido,
Right.
although oftentimes women have lack of libido. Oftentimes that
Right.
becomes a struggle. When they first have babies, there's a lack of libido. Then they're breastfeeding, then they have a lack of libido, and then they aren't sleeping for many years, and then they have another one. So women often struggle with that a little bit more than the men, although sometimes not. Sometimes they have more. But women often do struggle with the moisture issue,
Right.
and being able to maintain the moisture. That's for sure an issue when it
That's a
comes
big thing. I
to
think after, especially after like menopause, right? There's
yeah,
those issues that come to play.
oftentimes. Not always, not always. And there are definitely a lot of things we could do for that.
I'm sure. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the good workarounds for the challenges that people have that you said that, there are things that you can.
Yeah. So when it comes to physical illnesses and things like that, it's about really being able to talk openly and honestly, and really be vulnerable. And often when you are physically vulnerable, that means you have to be that much more emotionally vulnerable. And oftentimes it feels that much harder because you feel so weakened. physically, and it feels like scarier. You feel like your body is just, you feel like you can't rely upon your body anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's also your mind, or sometimes it's a combination of those two things. And when you feel that you can't really rely on your body in the way that you once were able to, especially for those athletes out there or people who were really, really were in touch with their bodies and now aren't, it's really, really scary and really, really threatening. And so they really sometimes need some help being able to express their feelings about the loss of functioning and things like that. And so it's about really being able to share with your partner where you can be touched, how you can be touched, how different positions, and exploring different positions that are more appropriate, and maybe doing, having intimacy at times that are where they have more energy, maybe earlier in the morning or earlier in the evening or after a nap or, at different times when nobody is in the house. And oftentimes there's nobody in the house ever,
Right,
depending. You could do it all over the house. And that's something that can really create some spiciness. You could do it on the stairs for all anybody cares.
right,
If you could do it on the lounge room floor, no one's going to walk in on the dining room table, go crazy. So you could really spice things up in a lot of different ways if you're really willing to take those chances and really willing to read up on things and explore things. Yeah, and so other workarounds are just really communicating a lot about and knowing your own body and knowing how your body has changed and knowing, where your edges, where your learning edges, and being able to share that with one another and really being able to have like sort of have communication and emotional intimacy be the segue towards the physical intimacy.
that's so true. I remember having conversation. I don't remember even with who and how that came to play with one of my clients, but she said to me something like, um, as she got older, she realized the significance of foreplay. Because for her,
Yeah,
she personally felt that she needs a lot more of that.
mm,
Things that she realized as she got older, when she was much younger, she couldn't care less. But now
yeah,
she feels that there's a different stage and she does need that. And also she
right.
said sometimes she said, expressing intimacy doesn't have to be what you think it is. It could also be, that just stroking somebody's arm could be intimacy. Just looking at somebody's
Mm,
eyes can be intimacy. Just saying how much you
I
love
agree.
them and just being real with your raw emotions can be intimacy. There's a lot
Yeah.
of ways to share intimacy as we get older, and it just doesn't have to be just the physical like we're always used to seeing in movies and whatever.
And it's not just as you get older. I really believe in really planting those seeds when you're younger so that they are there when you're older. But the problem is people don't realize that you literally need to plant those seeds because it's really, really hard if you just wake up and you're married for 20, 25 years and all of a sudden it's like you haven't done any of this work. You haven't done any of the emotional, laying that emotional foundation. And then all of a sudden you wake up and it's like, who are you? This is not the way I speak. This is not the way that I want to be spoken to. This is not, I don't do that. And it's really, and so many people often say, oh, my husband, my wife doesn't want to go to therapy. And we have this issue and we're just, whatever, we'll just put it by the wayside. And then the wayside happens, 20 years later, and then where are you? So that's often really a challenge. But the other thing is that's interesting with the younger couples is, they often have quickies, right?
Right.
And you can have a quickie if the moisture is working, if the libido is working, if the erection, the ejaculation, if all those pieces are working well, then a quickie is great. And for the older couples, why would you want to have a quickie when you have all this time to fill?
True. It's true. I
Yeah,
was also thinking about it. Actually, intimacy, it's like a language. So you're right. If you don't learn the language when you're early in your relationship, then you lose it, just like you lose
yeah,
everything, just like you lose any language. If you don't use
yeah,
it, then you lose it
yeah.
as you get older. And I was thinking it was funny because I remember when we were, my friends and I were young couples, I remember we had these intimate conversations. The women of the group would say, like, we need that space, even for, you're right, it says foreplay. You need that space from becoming a mother and a wife to becoming a woman. in bed to be able to get to that place of intimacy. It's not like, okay, I came back from work, let's just go. It's like I just spent like 5 hours cleaning yuck in the bathroom. I just need to feel like a person, and then I need to feel like a
Yeah.
woman in order to be able to perform in that respect. So you're
Yes.
right. Like the foreplay needs to come actually in every stage and not just as you get older.
Absolutely. And foreplay is also verbal. You
Absolutely.
know, it's not just about kissing here or kissing there. It's about really speaking in a way that makes, each of you feel desired and desirable.
Absolutely. So true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, did you in your practice see cases where you could share some of the, cases that you had with us about issues that came up as people got older? Anything interesting that you could share with us?
Yeah, sure. I could talk about couples where the second time around, couples where they were both widowed and their intimate lives hadn't been very good up until the second time around, or they in the previous relationships. In one situation, it was one where the woman just kind of tolerated intimacy with her husband, and he wasn't really into it all that much. She actually had a higher libido than he did, and then he eventually passed away. And she was hoping that this next time around, in her late 60s, early 70s, she'd be all guns blazing. And the husband had actually nursed his wife for a very long time with an illness, and then she passed away, and so he had zero intimacy, physical intimacy,
Wow.
for 10, 20 years. Like this man was a trooper, mamash a tzaddik, as we say, and funny enough, the couple were actually shomer negia when
Oh,
they came
wow.
to me. I know. I'd never seen a shomer negia 60-year-old couple before.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know that they could talk about it without actually doing it. And it was Corona. So they weren't even together. They were barely together anyway. So Shomriki was quite easy because they were so scared about giving each other illnesses and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And we met outside in my patio here, not even over Zoom. And so it was just about really helping teach them the language about how to talk about intimacy so that they could really sow those seeds, so that they could both know that they were on the same page because they were so scared that that they wouldn't have intimacy again, that they were going to be engaging in another relationship where there wouldn't be intimacy. But it was kind of interesting where there was absolutely no touch whatsoever prior to the marriage. So
Wow.
it
That's
was
very
fascinating.
challenging. That's very challenging.
Oh yeah, it was very, very challenging. They were
I
very
would
sweet
actually think with
couple.
widows, it would be, sometimes when you are in a relationship with somebody who is a widow, you feel like
Yeah,
you're competing sometimes against a ghost, right? Because maybe the first relationship was wonderful and magical.
yeah,
And, it's not like something went wrong, like with a divorce. And maybe
yeah.
that intimacy was also magical and wonderful. And then this comes a
Mm.
second relationship, and you're always worried that maybe the back of his or her head they are actually comparing you to the other person, which they loved very much and had a wonderful life with.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when someone passes away, there's often this fantasy about how that person was. And it's only when I sort of start to scratch the surface that they realize actually there were a lot of things that kind of cheesed them off about their former partner. And they'd kind of suppress those memories and those feelings. I can remember another guy I was working with, an older man, not such an older man. I mean, I think he was actually in his 50s, and he'd nursed his wife. He gave her everything, and he was really a wonderful, wonderful man. And he was so scared about betraying her by getting married again. He was young and all his kids were like out of the house or just about to get married or whatever it was. And he'd built up a lovely, business, and he had so much time to give, and he was still, thank God, really fit and healthy. And he really put his wife on this massive pedestal. And he was really thinking he'd never find anybody who was just like her. And then slowly, slowly, he realized, well, actually, this sort of bothered him and that sort of bothered him. And slowly but surely, he was able to really see her for how and what she really was. And, within a few months, he was dating someone very seriously. And
Well,
repartnered, and yeah,
that's very
as far
nice.
as
That's
I
a
know,
good
he's
story.
still quite happy.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I think we touched a little bit about this, but let's just go into it anyways. How does the emotional connection play out when it comes to challenges relating to physical intimacy in later life?
Yeah. So, as I said, you really need to lay that foundation early. I mean, preferably. I mean, that would be the ideal situation. You want to really be knowing that you can each speak on some sort of similar emotional level. And look, I've had couples where they both didn't know how to they didn't have an emotional language. They came from families where I call it the more waspy side of things, where they just, emotions really are not to be shared with anybody but maybe yourself, if that. And so they didn't really have that ability to connect. It's like they knew that something was missing, but they didn't really know what that was or how to do it. So it's about teaching them both how to do that, how to connect in that way. And oftentimes there'll be couples where one is a very emotional person and the other one is not at all. And so it's about sort of evening out the playing field. But so in an ideal world, you'd be working on that earlier on in life. But bar that, I always say better late than never, right? And sometimes you might just wake up and realize, okay, we actually haven't been doing this, or maybe it's gone by the wayside. Maybe you did have this strong emotional connection, but the kids just kind of got in the way. There's so much going on, there's so much busyness, and that you have wars, you have Corona, you have all sorts of things that are taking over your life, your career, and so on. And so it's about really refining yourselves and really being able to relearn and feel safe once again to really be able to bear your soul in that way so that you really build this deep emotional connection.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just wondering, like in second relationships, not when somebody was not as a widow, but as a divorcee in a second relationship. I'm sure there's other things that come to play because if you're thinking about it, when the
Mm,
person was younger, they had the business and the worries and the financials and the little children and all that, blah, blah, blah. And
sure.
now they are both in their, let's say, 50, late 50s, early 60s, and children are not in the house, or even if they're still in the house, they're not taking care of them like they used to when they were small. They definitely don't have lack of sleep because of them. Um, their business probably is, thriving, or they're not working as hard, hopefully, and they have a lot more time and a lot more time to actually think about these things, which they didn't necessarily have in their first relationship.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not even it's learning a new language with a new person.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes they say that there's like each person has about seven different marriages. Sometimes those marriages are going to be married to the same person, and
Right.
sometimes you're going to have to do that with a few others. Ideally, you do that with the same person because it's a lot more financially um frugal
Right.
or financially, I can't think of the word, savvy.
Right.
It's more financially savvy to be married to one person in your life,
Right.
as that's your area of expertise, right? But sometimes you just really do have to part ways because you're just butting heads, or you realize that you're just so totally different from each other, and you're just not going to be able to be satisfied in the way that you once were.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And then you should also, and yeah, and the fact that you have divorced doesn't mean that your life is over. You need to just
not at
figure
all.
it out with a new person.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is possible, and I've seen a lot of wonderful things. I feel like I didn't really answer your question. I'm sorry, I lost track of your
No, I think you
question.
did regarding the emotional connection play out when it comes
Yeah,
to physical intimacy later in life. I think we did sort of touch on that.
yeah.
We did
Yeah.
do that.
But in terms of a divorced couple, right, where they are where they're just kind of getting used to themselves again in a new relationship, especially let's say if they've been divorced for a while, right?
Ab-
That's really a big challenge. I've seen that where one is just coming out of a divorce and the other one has been divorced for years and years. And they don't even know how their body operates with somebody else because they haven't been in a significant relationship with somebody else for some time.
Right.
And or sometimes it's the case in both cases, especially if the marriage was running low, uh, at a low ebb, with a partner who just recently got divorced, right? And so it's about each of them kind of realizing that we haven't been intimate with anybody for a long time. We need to really relearn our bodies. We need to relearn how we are, how we want to be, because we haven't accessed this part of ourselves for such a long time. And let's both be scared together. That's kind of the way they often put it.
That's actually nicer because you feel like you're
Yeah.
on the same sort of on the same playing field and you don't feel that one has an edge over the other because you're just in it together. I think
Yeah.
it makes it safer for both people to understand, you know what? I'm in there with you together. I'm scared with you together. I don't know how it's going to work together. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the trick often. And I think that's the hardest part that I have in my role is really helping people become vulnerable because it really feels very threatening and scary if they've never been allowed to be vulnerable in cases where their parents shunned them because they shared their fears with them, as
Right.
opposed to encouraging them and validating them and saying, "Hey, little Johnny, I'm so sorry you had a really hard day. I'm so sorry that your teacher yelled at you. I'm so sorry that your best friend ditched you for somebody else." And that's really what we needed oftentimes. And so we get scared that if our parents couldn't do that for us, how much more so a girlfriend, a boyfriend, our partners can do that for us as well. But
It's
that's the thing
true.
that we have to really create a safe space for and really hope that, our partner really wants to be on board with that. And oftentimes that's the very thing our partner wants to do, but oftentimes they just don't have the tools in order to do that. And they just need a little extra help from somebody from the outside.
It's so true. I think at the end of the day, intimacy is all about vulnerability,
Yeah.
right?
Good intimacy.
Good
Good
intimacy
intimacy.
is all about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Being able to be confident with your vulnerability
Yeah.
in front of that person that you love.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Otherwise, it's bad intimacy.
Correct. Well, how can people get to you, Micki, if people want to talk to you more about this or need help?
Sure. Yeah, people can reach out to my website, lovingwisely.co.il. I've got an Instagram page. I've got a Facebook page. You can find me actually on Instagram, Micki Laavin-Pell. Um, yeah, I'm on YouTube. I've got a new
Wow,
podcast myself called Let's Start, because it's all about brand new starts.
absolutely. Love
Yeah.
it. Okay, well, this was great. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Uh, thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening to us. Have a good night. Stay safe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in my next podcast. Have a good night. Bye bye.